She demanded $1,200 and threatened to have the city condemn my house, and when her so-called master key jammed in my lock, she panicked so badly she called the cops, only to cuff herself to my front door screaming, "I live here!" That was the climax. But let me back up and tell you how it all started, because the path to that moment nearly broke me. My name's Benjamin Thompson, though around the neighborhood, most folks just know me as David Carter, the quiet security consultant working from home. That cover let me keep a low profile because in reality, I'm the police chief of our small town. I never expected I'd need those skills against a woman claiming to be our brand new HOA president. My wife Becky and I had bought into Riverside Meadows because it was calm, safe, and neighborly. We never imagined someone could twist the idea of a homeowners association into a weapon. But that's exactly what Mary King did, storming into our lives in a sharp bob haircut power suit and a binder of fake regulations. The first time I saw her, Becky had just come back from groceries. I heard voices in the kitchen, voices that didn't belong in my house. I crept down, ready for a break-in, but what I found was worse in its own way. This woman was photographing our appliances, measuring corners, muttering about safety violations. When Becky walked in, Mary whipped out a shiny badge and declared she was the HOA president conducting a routine safety inspection. She rattled off violations: paint color wrong front bushes, too high security cameras out of spec. She slapped a paper on the counter and demanded $500 on the spot. Becky looked shocked. I kept my face blank, pretending to be just another confused husband, while my mind ticked through every detail: her avoidance of the cameras, her uncanny knowledge of our schedule. This wasn't a neighbor with authority issues. This was a professional scammer, but the act was convincing. For Becky, for anyone without training, it felt real, and Mary knew it. She carried herself with that practiced HOA arrogance, the kind that brooks no argument. I wanted to call her bluff right there, but I knew blowing my cover could cost me the bigger picture, so I let Becky pay, hating every second of it while I cataloged her every move. Days passed and the pressure escalated. Mary showed up with a guy she called her maintenance contractor, a jittery man named Brad, carrying tools he clearly hadn't grabbed by accident. He pointed out supposed fire hazards, loose railings, imaginary wiring issues. Mary nodded solemnly, then hit us with another fine $1,200 this time. She waved papers with seals, PDFs printed off some crooked template. Becky's hands trembled holding the bill. My gut churned, but I bit my tongue. My cover mattered more than my pride. And then came the worst part: doubt. Becky turned on me, her voice tight with fear. "You're the security guy, David. How could you let this happen? Shouldn't you know if this is real?" I wanted to tell her everything, that I'd spotted Mary's grift from the start, that I was already running her through federal databases, but I couldn't. Instead, I stood there, a husband who looked helpless while the woman I loved questioned whether I'd failed to protect her. That cut deeper than any threat Mary threw at us. For one brief, crushing moment, I thought maybe the only way out was to pay to keep the peace, to swallow my pride and accept the humiliation. And I hated myself for it. The turning point came by accident. Becky, bless her persistence, found a notebook stuffed behind our mailbox. Pages filled with schedules, codes, neighbor routines, our lives mapped out like a criminal's playbook. That was the smoking gun. There was no way any legitimate HOA president had reason to know my garage code or the fact that Becky shopped Tuesdays at 10. That was surveillance, plain and simple. That's when my despair turned to fire. I wasn't just defending my pride anymore. I was protecting my wife, my neighbors, my entire community. I pressed Brad, the nervous handyman, during one of his visits. Using the kind of conversational pressure I'd honed over decades, I got him to crack. He admitted Mary paid him $200 per house to find violations and prep fake hazards. He hinted at her gambling debts, the shady people breathing down her neck. That explained her desperation, but it also meant this was bigger than HOA harassment. This was organized crime, and it was crawling through our neighborhood like rot under paint. With Brad talking, I coordinated with my department under the radar, looping in federal contacts. The plan was simple. Let Mary overplay her hand, document everything, and spring the trap. Still, I couldn't tell Becky. Not yet. The secrecy was tearing at us, but the alternative, tipping Mary off, would have let the whole network vanish. So I carried the weight alone. The night of the sting, my house wasn't a home, it was a funnel. I'd adjusted locks, staged escape routes to dead-end placed cameras in every corner. Brad agreed to bring Mary in one last time to plant the evidence that would justify her massive repair demand. My pulse thudded steady as a metronome while I watched the feeds. At exactly 11 p.m., Mary strode up with her bag of electrical gear full of confidence. She slid Brad's duplicate key into the back door and stepped inside like she owned the place. But she didn't know every move was being recorded, every violation logged. She worked the rooms with professional efficiency, laying wires, loosening screws, creating fire hazards that could have killed us. I clenched my fist, furious at the thought of her endangering Becky just for a payout. Yet I forced myself to wait. Evidence first, justice second. When she finished, she moved to the back door, her planned exit. The key turned uselessly. Again and again. That's when her cool veneer cracked. Panic spilled across her face. And then she did something that almost made me laugh. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Imagine that, calling the cops while in the middle of burglarizing a house bag of sabotage tools at her feet. "I'm trapped," she cried. "These people locked me inside. I'm the HOA president." The dispatcher's voice stayed calm, but I knew the recording was golden. A confession wrapped in hysteria. Minutes later, Officer Ryan Mitchell pulled up. He found Mary banging at the front door, flashing her fake badge, insisting she was being unlawfully imprisoned. Ryan's eyes narrowed at the bag of tools, the forged paperwork, the sheer nonsense tumbling out of her mouth. Then he saw me standing calm in my own living room. Recognition flickered. The pieces clicked. Mary, though, wasn't done. Desperation makes fools of criminals. She lunged for Ryan's cuffs, screaming about making a citizen's arrest. In the chaos, she snapped one bracelet shut onto her own wrist, the other looped to my front door handle. She shrieked, "I live here. This is my house," while literally chained to the door like some deranged parody of authority. Ryan's body cam caught every absurd second. It was the kind of moment prosecutors dream about, evidence that destroys any defense. For me, watching her thrash and wail while the trap closed wasn't just satisfying, it was vindication. Months of restraint, of swallowing my anger, of feeling Becky's doubt, and my own despair all paid off in that instant. The woman who had terrorized families, shaken down my neighbors, and made me question myself was finished. Her own arrogance had snapped shut like the cuffs on her wrist. And that's where it ended. Mary King, the fake HOA tyrant, reduced to a screaming spectacle, caught in her own lie, surrounded by evidence so overwhelming even she couldn't talk her way out. No celebrations, no champagne, just the sight of a predator undone by her own schemes. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple. Real authority doesn't need to shout or threaten. Truth speaks loud enough on its own.